Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who I know is going to bring a smile on your face. Because he really focuses in on positivity at work and at home. So get ready to laugh. Glenn Parker, the only child of 2 hardworking parents, grew up on the New York City streets. He played street games like stickball, punchball, 3-box baseball, and Johnny on the Pony with his buddies. He loved the competitive aspects of sports and opportunities it provided for leadership. As he got older and taller, he moved on to competitive schoolyards and recreational league basketball. In high school and later in college, Glenn played varsity sports where he learned the values of hard work, practice, and collaboration. The sum total of these experiences helped Glenn learn that he succeeded when he worked hard, whether in sports or in the classroom. He took those values into his work life, and after working for several organizations, Glenn and a colleague started a small business as training and organizational development consultants. The company took Glenn to all parts of the U.S., allowing him to work with a diverse group of people working in a wide variety of industries and occupations. During this time, he narrowed the consulting focus to building effective teams and creating team-based organizations. His clients have included pharmaceutical companies such as Novartis, Merck, J&J, Abbott, and BMS. Telecom giants such as AT&T, Lucent, Bell Labs, and Pacific Bell, and industrials such as 3M, Kimberly-Clark, Pratt & Whitney, and BOC Gases. A variety of healthcare providers, retailers, and government agencies such as the EPA, the NIH, and the U.S. Coast Guard. Glenn always loved to write, and his first article was published while he was still in graduate school, but it took a while for him to work up the courage and confidence to write a book. With the encouragement of Peter Block, Josie Bass published his first book, Team Players and Teams, in 1990, and then went on to be a bestseller. The book included a self-assessment survey, which was subsequently published as a separate booklet and went on to sell more than 1 million copies as the Parker Team Player Survey. Many books and leader guides followed, including another bestseller, Cross-Functional Teams Working with Allies, Enemies, and Other Strangers, and his most recent book, co-authored with his son Michael, is Positive Influence, the leader who helps people become their best self. Outside of work, Glenn has always been on the front lines of political and social causes, as well as charitable issues such as cancer. He is a cancer survivor and a longtime volunteer with the American Cancer Society, and he co-founded Run for Dad, an annual event that draws some 1,500 people and is designed to raise awareness about the dangers of prostate cancer and funds for cancer research. Glenn and his wife Judy live in central New Jersey, and they are parents of 3 grown children and grandparents to 6 wonderful grandchildren, all of whom live nearby. Judy and Glenn share of the love of travel, and having visited numerous places around the world to enjoy art, culture, history, and good food. Glenn Parker, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Glad you're here.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you please share with us how what you're going to share today is going to improve the customer experience?
Well, let me say that there's 2 things that we wanted to get out of this whole experience, which is, how do you first become a more effective positive influence leader? What can you do to be a positive influence leader? How to be more effective as a positive influence leader? And I think this is, maybe equally important, which is how to develop and train other people to be positive influence leaders in your organization. So a big focus of this is the training and development of positive influence leaders for the future. And that's what we're gonna talk about, and that's obviously what's also in the book as well. Because I'm a practitioner, my son is a practitioner. We think and write for other practitioners in organizations.
Well, and so the thing is, it's true. Let's look at this from a translative or relative, connection of property. And because a lot of people talk about, culture, they talk about employee engagement creates customer engagement. So you talk about, how this work actually makes an impact. So I think it's important for some to kind of really get their heads and hands around, what are we talking about when we do this work? What is that result?
Right. Yeah. Well, let me answer the question in a way that we also answered in the book and with the research that we did. We interviewed some 50 people across a wide variety of industries and occupations, from corporate people to doctors and nurses in healthcare and so on. And one of the things that we did is, and I think what people appreciate very much about the book is the stories that illuminate the conclusions that we came to. And I want to tell you my story because I had a very early in my life, I was fortunate to have someone who was a positive influence leader. So let me take you back, a ways back, because my first job out of graduate school, my first boss, my first performance appraisal. So I had prepared for this, and I'm meeting with my boss, Larry, and it's going well, and he thinks I've done a good job. And I have to say, just parenthetically, my job pretty much involved doing research and writing reports. Kind of boring. Okay. But I was good at it. I was very good at it. We get to that point in the performance appraisal that says your development plan. So Larry says, well, what do you want to do? And, I had looked around, and the people across the hall in leadership development and leadership training seemed to be having all the fun. They were traveling all over. And they were conducting leadership classes, and they would come back with stories of things that happened in class, and of course travel stories that they all had. And I would say, "Wow, that looks really interesting." So I said to Larry, "I think I might like that, but I don't know. What I'd like to do is to be able to observe a class." So he said to me, "Gee, that's interesting, Glenn, because I'm actually traveling down south next week to do workshops in 2 different cities. So why don't you come with me?" He said, "The thing is, I really can't justify your travel expenses unless you teach something." So at that point, my lips start to quiver. And Larry, I don't know anything. How can I teach something? He said, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." And he did. And I did. And I taught 2 hours in the afternoon of the second day, and it went very well. And I said, I like this. I think I can do this. I like kind of standing up and, telling people what I know and helping them learn. And that was my first sort of moment. And Larry was the first positive influence leader in my life. He positioned me for success. Jim, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I didn't know that I could do it. In fact, if you asked me yes or no, gun to my head, I would have said no. But he saw something that I didn't see. And the other thing is that was very important in terms of leadership is that he didn't say to me, "I'm going down south. It's a 2-day workshop. Why don't you teach the 2 days? I'll sit in the back and evaluate you." No, he gave me a very controlled piece of the program to do that he felt that I could do and do well. And that's what, we call sort of positioning you for success. I don't throw you out there in the deep end initially. So that was kind of my first experience with it. Now, of course, I didn't recognize what Larry had done at the time. I wish I could say that. but I didn't. And but it was, what it did is it changed the direction of my life and my career. I realized this was my true north. This is what I really wanted to do. And so many people have had similar experiences. They just didn't process it at the time. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely it does. And I think when you start looking at the, let's just say where we are today with the workforce, where we are today with, the types of work that have to be done with the
Right.
work that they're currently being done, is, there's several things associated with how we get to the point to where we engage and impact and develop. And there's a very big difference between training, mentoring, coaching. I mean, those are very, very different roles, and we don't understand those. It's kind of foreign to us, and so one of the things that struck me in the first chapter of the book, which is titled "You Didn't Build That Alone," I was really struck by the fact, and I started thinking that I would dare to say that a large number of people in the workplace probably never had a relationship, a very strong, deep relationship with someone who they could call a coach, a leader, a mentor. They may have had trainers, but that's not the same thing. I mean, so when you start looking at people becoming successful and not having these roles, I think most of them don't have those type of people. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, I think it's a correct assumption that, if you talk about someone who is a coach, or you're the manager of your department, I think that's probably the case. But it doesn't have to be that way. A person can be a positive influence and be a colleague, somebody who's a peer in the organization. It can be a friend. It can be, in many cases, and this is what our research found, is that it's often a parent. Well, the first positive influence in many people's lives is a parent. And that gets people off to a very, very positive start in the world when they have a parent that is a positive influence on them. And then maybe they discover someone in school, a teacher, who doesn't see themselves as a formal coach or a mentor, but they're a teacher and they're inspirational. They're motivational. And then you get to the workplace and you discover, your first boss. Or maybe it's your third or fourth boss. It may not be the first. You may not be that fortunate as I was. So yes, but it can, a positive influence can come in a different form, very different form than the formal titles that we tend to associate with it. And that's the cool thing about it, I think.
Well, okay, and what you say is absolutely true. And we do have those. Oftentimes we don't recognize those, but it seems like when you start looking at the pace of change, the influences that we have that are out there, the shifts and changes in the economy, and people now going from, not too long ago, having careers that were 20, 30 years, now the careers being 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 1.5. I mean, it's all these little, mini things.
Right.
I have to be more intentional about finding influences and structuring and having some consistency, don't I?
To find somebody who is a positive influence. Yes, right. And right. So say more about that. Let me break that down a little bit.
I think because of that opportunity, or because of the conditions and the systems that we're working in now, and when I say systems, meaning that it's not the 30-year careers, right? That we have to be more intentional and seek out those relationships so that it's consistent and so that we're continuing to move forward. Otherwise, we just spiral. And so, like, for example, when you start looking at the numbers associated with people who are seeking out, mental health support with all this COVID stuff hit. Now, I would dare to say that if we were more intentional in trying to find positive influences, being consistent, with meeting and having those, knowing that, hey, I have a gap here and I need to, be intentional as far as my development, we probably wouldn't have seen as many people seeking help. That's just a theory.
Yeah, I think I believe that to be true, is that we sometimes we realize we need someone to be a positive influence and we seek out that person. I have developed a network of people, over the course of my life that I go to. I used to call them sanity checks. Okay, Jim, this is what I'm thinking right now. Does that make sense? And so I have people like that in my life, and I'm fortunate. But it's been intentional on my part that as I've worked with people all around, I've said, okay, I feel like this is the person I want to continue the relationship with. And so, yes, I think that's a good point. And I think people need to be more of that rather than trying to tough it out alone. I'm a big believer in, collaboration and working together. And I love the idea of bouncing ideas off of other people. This is one of the joys of writing this book with my son, is that he has a very different experience than mine. He's worked his entire career in financial services, and he's led a number of groups. And so I will bounce an idea off him. I bounced the idea for this book off of him. And, he said, yeah, I'd read that book. And that meant a lot to me because I know his practical experience and I respect it a lot. He's also very up on the literature. So he knows what's out there. And he said, yeah, I haven't seen anything like this. So, yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And I seek it out, and I've benefited from it. And I value those people, and I thank them regularly.
Well, and I think that's really a really important message here, is that for all of us, we need to make sure that those voids first are recognized and that we're filling them intentionally if we're not working for an employer that's helping to supply that. Whether it's we take the religious path and we have a pastor or a minister or a priest or a rabbi or whatever, we have to make sure that those are in place, whether they're family or and I would dare to say, don't do family, because a lot of times they're not going to share things with you and be, or they're going to be more mindful and maybe more worrisome about hurting feelings and stuff. So maybe it shouldn't be family, but then maybe you have, some other stories to that. And so I want everybody to kind of understand because the way you break this down in the book is really important. So when you're like, well, who do I need? Right. So you talk about 4 positive types of influence leaders. And you talk supportive, positive influence leader, the teacher positive influence leader, the motivating positive influence leader, and then the role model positive influence leader. How did you come up with these 4?
It's a great question because we didn't start out that way. And I think that's kind of the way we did the research. We had an idea, a very high level idea of coming up with a profile of a positive influence leader because I had an experience that was the genesis for the book. Someone who I was very close to was a client of mine for 20 years, which is, unusual to have a client for that long a period of time, but it morphed into a friendship and the like. And he passed away. And I got an invitation to a memorial, and I began to think about how he had been a positive influence on me. You think I was a consultant to him, but he was a positive influence on me. He got me to do things that I had never done before and maybe didn't think that I could do. Because he liked the work. He brought me in to be a team consultant and to create a team-based organization for him, which I did. And I thought, well, I'll be done after 2 years. And at the end of that period, he said to me, I need my organization needs customer service training. We have a lot of customer contact over the phone, and many of our people work in the field. I said, well, I've never really done customer service training, but I can find one of my colleagues and bring him or her in here. He said, you'll learn. Jim, he said, you'll learn. And so I did, and I learned. But he wanted me to, because he knew I knew his organization. I knew I would tailor anything to his organization. That's what he wanted. He didn't want some off the shelf thing that had been created elsewhere. And there were several other experiences like that, and I began to realize, wow, that was powerful. I said, I can't be the only person in the world that's had someone like this in their life. And that's when I went to Michael, and he said, yeah. Let's do that. So we started out looking for a profile. What are the characteristics of a positive influence leader? And we started asking people about their experiences. If you had a positive experience in your life, and tell me what they did, and how did they influence you and the like. And we started to get the answers. And when we got finished, we looked at them and we said, these don't fit into one bucket. They don't fit into one bucket. And as a result, we looked at this and we came up with somebody who eventually we called a supportive positive influence leader. That's the person that says, you can do this, Jim. I know it. I can see it in you. I can help you. I won't do it for you, but I got your back. So that kind of supportive person. For example, a woman we interviewed, Jennifer, she told us that her mother said to her early on, she said, Jennifer, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something just because you've never done it before. Just process that for a moment, okay? And also, she wanted to go to college and be a history major. And someone else said to her, well, what are you going to do with a history degree? You know what she did with a history degree, Jim? She's now a senior curator at the Smithsonian Museum of American History. That's what she did with a history degree, and that's what she did with the support from her mother. Then there's the teacher, because many people encountered people who taught them, and they don't necessarily all have the title of teacher or instructor or trainer. They might have some other, but they teach you what you need to know in order to be successful. Yes, it may be skills and experience. It may be knowledge and information that you need in order to do your job. But it also may be, here's how to understand the culture of this organization. You want to get something done? You want to work with another the client organization, go talk to Jim. That's the culture. It's not in the policies and procedures manual. It's in the culture about how things get done. They also teach you the right way to do things, that there's a right way to do things in this world and in this organization. It's, ethical standards and things along those lines. So the teacher, sometimes they're inspirational too, teachers. For example, Lindsay, a woman that we interviewed who was in fact a school teacher, she went back to school to become a teacher. She'd had a career, in business, and she went back. She wanted to become a teacher. She got inspired to do that. She came across Professor Carlson, who taught her classroom techniques, but also he was so charismatic, so inspiring that she ended up wanting to be a great teacher because of him. And she did. She ended up being a great teacher. She works in the New York City school system. And, 2 years ago, she was selected as one of they picked 18 of the best teachers in the New York City school system. You know how many teachers there are? There are probably 10,000 in the New York City school system. Then we found people that were motivational, like my first boss, Larry. That was the person who helps you find your true north, who you should be, your purpose in life, what you should be doing, and they inspire you to get there. Finally, we haven't talked about the role models. Some people are role models. They look and they say, oh, that's how you do it. That's how you lead an organization. That's how you be a top engineer in this organization. Oh, okay. So they show you, they model the right way, the way to do something in an organization. So most very often role models are people you've met, when they say, yeah, I worked with someone who was my senior as an OD consultant, and I used to marvel and watch him. The key thing about this, though, and this was the case for me, is that very often you can't completely emulate all of those things. You've got to take some of the things that they do well and integrate them with your style. Otherwise, it feels, just phony, not real. For example, one of the most famous role models in sports is Michael Jordan, North Carolina guy, and so. But many people will say the really ones who were thought, that he was a role model for them. The smart ones didn't try to copy his jump shot. What they did is they emulated his work ethic. First person in the gym in the morning, last person to leave at night. Practice the same thing over and over again. Take 1,000 foul shots until you can get over 90% of them correct. That's what, sometimes people, they have role models they've never met. Role models they've actually never met. So we ended up with 4 styles and 4 types. And it's sometimes you are one of those 4 and can be extremely effective. Sometimes there's a combo of 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. What we say is the transformational leader is the one that's able to encompass all 4, utilize all 4, and be situational about it. This is building on, Ken Blanchard's situational leadership. The really effective leaders are situational. They look at the situation and they say, oh, this is what I think you need right now, and I'm going to do it. All right. So they have an extensive repertoire of responses. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So that's kind of the 4 styles and how they sort of integrate. And we can talk about how to make use of that practically in organizations.
Well, I think that's important is to, okay, so I understand the framework, I understand these particular areas. For me, as I was going through a book, I started thinking, and you mentioned it about making sure that we're helping, whether you want to call them a coachee or a subordinate or heck, maybe even a peer sometimes, be able to recognize that you need these 4, for their developmental. And I'm like, well, gosh, as a leader, do I have to become these 4 and build the competencies in these areas? So, it can get kind of complex. So I think applying or application, how you go about doing that is really important to discuss.
Yes, and that's part of our role as practitioners, helping other practitioners. So we developed this positive influence leader survey, which in its first iteration is a self-assessment. And you may have taken it. Many people who read the book, it's in the back of the book. When they finish, they take this self-assessment. It gives you a reading on what your preference is. What is your most preferred style? And so people will use that and say, okay, this is who I am. If I want to be a more well-rounded leader, maybe I want to bring in some of the strengths of those other 2 or 3 styles to be more well-rounded and then work toward being a transformational leader. I will say that the survey is going to be published by our publisher, HRD Press, as a separate booklet to make it a lot easier to use in leadership development and in team development sessions. There'll be a second booklet, which will be the 360 version of it. So I think everybody in your audience knows what 360 is. You give it out to, people who are peers, members of your team, people who report to you, other people that you think will have relevant feedback for you, so you can compare your self-assessment with the assessment of other people. And the third booklet will be a how to use this in leadership development and training and development classes, and also in team building and how to develop effective teams. So this is where we get to how do we use this inspiration to improve the effectiveness of leaders and the effectiveness of organizations by creating more and better leaders.
So, okay. And I think that is similar to many other systems to where it's self-discovery and understanding,
Right.
And then you start looking at being able to grow, and have impact from there and getting to the point where, you call it being that situation or being that transformational leader who can, make a difference because I've built competencies and then therefore subsequent skills, in all of those areas. And
Right.
I would even dare to say, well, so this starts getting into that whole issue that we were talking about a moment ago, though. How do we accomplish that when I've got a bunch of free agent workers? I have a lot of remote staff. They don't work for me. I've got, all of this different type of work environments, hybrid and virtual. And I mean, I've got all of these different configurations. How do I prevent, or how do I get to the point to where my organization, I'm really starting to get some impact and and the customer's feeling it because I'm doing all of this work? I mean, it seems to me like it's going to be hard to apply it and put it all together so we gain momentum.
Well, we're going through this transition now where we have this, the hybrid workplace, where some people are working from home, some people are coming into the workplace, some are doing a split between working some from home, working some in the office. We haven't completely played that out yet. But I think what has not gone away is the need for effective leadership, the need for effective leadership development. What you're getting to is the delivery mechanism. How are we going to get there? And, so many of these staff meetings are done via Zoom, but we're going to have to learn, and we are learning now, how to do development using the technology of Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and all the ones that people are using now, and we will use that. One of the things we did with some degree of deliberateness is, and you probably noticed this, at the end of every chapter, we have not only a little bit of a summary, but also some very strategic questions that reflect on that chapter. That was done with, a good deal of intention. And I've already had at least one organization leader say to me, Glenn, this is what I'm doing now. Everybody in my team is reading the book. And what we're doing, we're taking it chapter by chapter. Each week we discuss the next chapter, and we use those 4 questions to learn and reflect on what was in that chapter and learn more how we can be more effective leaders. So they're doing it, they're using it, and they're using it remotely. I'm old school, Jim. I mean, I like face-to-face. I like to be with people. That's how I came up. That's probably how you came up. And most of the people here are used to that. But we may get back to some of that. We certainly hope that, that is the case. But we're going to have to do more of this remotely, just like we're going to have to do the survey, fill it out on our own, at our workstation, and then come together and discuss the results and, learn from what we can from the results of the survey. So yes, it's more the delivery rather than I would say the content that is changing.
Well, and so, figuring out your environment and where it works best for you is important. You're just trying to help to support that. Okay. So, when I think about, really the impacts that we have in our world, that are very negative in nature, and we do have all of these other, humps and hurdles that we have to get over. I start thinking about, timeline, transformation, points to impact and effect. So what have you seen when people start moving towards something like this, them experience and realize in regards to, the internal change and then, customer impact? I mean, how quick does that happen?
So you're talking about negative. How do people deal with negative experiences, right?
Yeah, just to overcome all the different forces. I mean,
yes, there's a lot of negativity out there, and it certainly impacts people. And that was part of the research. We asked people, have you ever had a negative experience in your life? Some person who brought negativity to the relationship. And I have to say this sadly, is that was a much easier question for many people to answer than the positive one. Excuse me. But so, for example, people told us stories. For example, one of the people we interviewed, an African-American engineer and engineering manager, told us about a story. When he was in high school, he was talking with his guidance counselor or career counselor, and he said, I want to go to college, and I want to do a double major in management and engineering. And she gave him the look like really? And that was it. But this was not a young man who remembered that experience from high school so vividly, Jim, that he was able to recall it with, much more drama than I've done here. So, he went on to get his engineering degree and get his double major in management, got out of school, went to work for GE, had a long career at GE, became an engineering manager, and so on. And I said to him, did you ever go back to that guidance counselor, that career counselor, and say, he said, nope, didn't have to. And I said to him, I said, Gene, do you think it was because you're African American that she saw you that way? He said, no, she was just bad at her job. She was just bad at her job. And so and we had other stories like that. So what one of the coping strategies that people developed that we learned is that, which was to use it as motivation, to say, you know what, I'm gonna prove her wrong, that I can do this. And we had a number of examples of that, that sort of, yeah, I'll prove you wrong. Another example was, people, you can't always get rid of negative influences. It could be a parent. It could be your boss. You can't just suddenly walk out on your parents and declare your independence. You can't sometimes, you can't afford to quit a job. And but people do is that they look and they learn and they take it all in and they remember it. So when they get their chance, I'm thinking of Mindy, a woman that we interviewed, and she talked about her first job. She worked in a women's health clinic, and the boss was somebody who fostered conflict among the members of the team. She did not listen to people's suggestions. She didn't listen. She wasn't open to ideas and new ways of doing things. So Mindy took it all in. She, was an important job for her to learn because she wanted to get into this whole area. And eventually, through some help with some other people, she opened a workshop for women who have been the subject of physical and mental abuse and sexual abuse. And she runs a very fine program now. And what she said to me is, I took that and said, when I get my turn, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to be open. I'm going to listen. I'm going to involve people. And there were a number of other examples. And also, I think we came up with 5 different coping strategies that people came up with to deal with negativity. And some of these stories, Jim, they break your heart. They just break your heart. You say, like, how did you get through this? It was really extraordinary stuff. I get very emotional when I talk about some of those.
Well, I think, I mean, that's, as they say, that's the human condition. We have to learn from those examples, because we're going to meet the same struggles. We need to know, how to go about, getting up and coping, like you were saying. Okay.
Right.
So you talked about the book, you talked about the supplements, you talked, the assessment, you talked about all of those. So when I think about this, there's a lot of things that you've had from a positive influence perspective in order to keep you going. And one of the things that we like to do on the show is share quotes so that we can focus on. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Yeah. There's one that goes way back to Rosabeth Moss Kanter. She wrote a wonderful book called The Change Masters. And she was at Harvard at the time. And the quote is, and it's been something that's driven, a lot of my experience, which is, everything looks like a failure in the middle. Everything looks like a failure in the middle. And what she's saying there is that, everything, a project starts out with great enthusiasm, and when it ends, and there's a big celebration, but in the middle, there's a lot of obstacles. And sometimes you feel like, I can't handle this. I'm not going to be able to do it. But the people who are successful, the positive influence leaders, or what Professor Kanter called the change masters, they persevere, they persist, they keep at it. They don't give up. They have what's more modern terms, we call it now grit. You remember the book by Angela Duckworth. And I that's one of the things that, that's that quote and the what's behind it. It drives me.
Well, and I appreciate you continuing to have grit and move forward. And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement, along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, here we go. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Glenn, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us a robust and rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Glenn, are you ready to hoe down?
Let's go. Let's do it. All right. I don't know if I can be brief. That's not my strength, but I'll do my best.
So, what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Overthinking. Yeah, just overthinking the thing, wanting to go over it and over it again. And yes, just overthinking.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Persist, persevere, keep going. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
What is one tool that you believe helps you lead in business or life?
I would say this whole idea of I like this idea of grit, the being resilient, pushing back, overcoming obstacles. Yeah.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre.
Well, can I do more than one, please? Okay. So I would say anything by Ken Blanchard, any Leadership in the 1 Minute Manager, The Visionary Leader by Warren Bennis, who's one of my heroes. I would say The Change Masters, and yes, I'll go with those three.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net and doing a search for Glenn Parker. Okay, Glenn, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Well, this is what I would do. I know I would look for more opportunities to be a positive influence on other people. I think that's one of the great things that we all can do is to help other people, and in my case, help people get through situations and be a positive influence on them. I didn't know it at the time. I think I could have done more. And I'm trying to make up for that now.
Glenn, I had fun with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
You can, there's a website for the book it's www, of course, thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. May I say this? I've enjoyed this conversation very much. I must say, Jim, this has been great. So what I want to say is that the first 3 people that contact me at that website who say, I'll buy a copy of Positive Influence on Amazon, and if they say they're going to do that, I will send them a signed copy of the book. And then they, in turn, can gift their copy to another person because positive influence leaders pay it forward. So you can email me at glenn@thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. Of course, give me your mailing address so I can send it to you. I have great powers, but I can't necessarily conjure up your address. So Glenn, GLENN, @thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. The first 3 emails that I get, I will send you a signed copy of the book, assuming that you've bought a copy of the book on Amazon. There you go.
Glenn Parker, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.